If you missed the New Year, New Books program with Allison, Julie, and Pamela, no worries, we've got a quick recap for you here. First up, nonfiction. Let's get started with Julie's pick.
We begin with the fastest-selling nonfiction book of all time, released January 10th, Prince Harry's Spare. Not since Harry Potter have I seen this type of excitement and fervor around a title, from the publisher to the fans. This memoir is broken up into 3 sections. First, the young Harry. Second, military, in which he serves for 10 years in the British Army. And finally, the present Harry, the family man, husband, and father. This is a book about grief and loss. First and foremost, a young boy who loses his mom and is left to navigate life in a spotlight that few can fathom. I listened, and I highly recommend the audio as Prince Harry provides the narration. I found the details were not nearly as shocking as the press wanted us to believe. There was a bit of oversharing, and yes, Harry might regret that later in life. However, word is he has enough information to share, even now, for a second book.
Edible Economics by Ha-Shun Jang. Jang is Korean by birth, but he was educated at Cambridge and still teaches there. And he uses food to explain various economic principles and economics in history. I found it fascinating, and if I had maybe had a book like this in college, I might have enjoyed economics a little bit more. One example I remember from the book, the British were the first to use limes and other citrus on their ships just as they were building up their navy, and they had a much stronger, healthier navy as a result because they didn't have scurvy. That helped lead at least to the idea of Britannia rules the waves and Britannia rules the world, and that colonization still impacts the world's economics today.
And our final selection in nonfiction is Forager, Field Notes for Surviving a Family Cult by Michelle Dowd. This memoir is due out on March 7th. This book is being promoted for fans of The Glass Castle and Educated. The Field is an ultra-religious doomsday cult that was founded by Dowd's grandfather. He believed he would live to be 500 years old and was a prophet in the church. This is Michelle's story of surviving over 10 years of abuse, poverty, and living off the land as she was isolated in the mountains of the Angeles National Forest. Michelle learned survival skills, how to trust animals, and ways to use everything and waste nothing. Each chapter begins with a visual picture of edible plants and a description of what portions of the plants can be eaten and what areas to avoid. Interesting to note, this cult is still in existence today, however, is under a different name. And now it's time for a change of pace.
We're going to switch things up with a little change of pace now. The Daughters of Izdihar by Hadir Elsbey is a fantasy book. It's the first in a planned duology, but no worries about a long wait for a series. The second book will be out this fall. It's set in a made-up kingdom, but very much based on Egypt. They have 2 young women coming of age and trying to find their place in the world, whether it's through marriage, careers, or possibly magic. One of them can move earth, and one of them can move water, but they're untrained in this magic, and that can lead to some problems. This is all set against a time when women are searching for more rights. So if you think you might like a book with multicultural suffragettes who also can do magic, this is the one for you. And also, check out this beautiful cover.
How to Sell a Haunted House is the latest from GRADY HENDRIX, released on January 17th. This is horror, dark comedy that is set in Charleston, South Carolina, where Hendrix grew up. Louise and Mark are grown-up siblings who could not be any more different. They find themselves having to come together to sell their family's home. You see, both parents have passed, and it becomes apparent the proceeds from the sale of the home will benefit both of them. The siblings take to sifting through all of their mother's puppets and dolls. You see, she's obsessed, and the remnants of their father's academic career. But what happens if a house doesn't want to be sold? What happens if that house has other plans? This is a story all about a family, the curses, the tales among their memories. And this book also teaches us that ghosts aren't the only thing that can haunt a home. Thrills, chills, and secrets abound in this one. USA Today says, like his novels, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires and The Final Girls Support Group, How to Sell a Haunted House is classic Hendrix, equal parts heartfelt and terrifying, a gripping new read from the horror master.
And now on to historical fiction. Your book clubs will find lots to discuss in these books. Moonrise over New Jessup. This thoughtful debut, set during the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, brings up lots of new ideas for discussion, as well as being the personal story of a marriage. Alice Young is traveling to Chicago, but her bus ticket only takes her as far as New Jessup, Alabama. New Jessup residents are not interested in integration. They believe their segregated town is truly separate but equal. Nearby Jessup residents are beginning to agitate for civil rights. Alice Young marries Raymond Campbell, who begins an underground movement toward integration in New Jessup. This is just a wonderful book with great characters, a compelling plot, and so much to talk and think about. Your book clubs will love it. Moonrise over New Jessup. The Mitford Affair by Marie Benedict has just been published. Marie Benedict will be familiar as a favorite author of book club titles. Her books are popular, revealing of women's stories who should be better known. The Mitfords are an aristocratic English family. Benedict's novel focuses on 6 sisters who were born during the early 1900s. Later, in the 1930s, Nancy, the oldest sister, becomes concerned when her younger sister Diana divorced her British husband and married a fascist leader. Unity, another sister, became fascinated by the rise of the Nazis and spent a lot of time in Germany. Nancy wrestles with where should her loyalties lie, with her country or with her family. This is well researched, as usual for Benedict books, and will be enjoyed by those still interested in World War II.
Next is Codename Sapphire, historical fiction from Pam Jenoff, will be released on February 7th. You may recall Jenoff from The Lost Girls of Paris. This latest book is based on true events and stories of sacrifice. It's 1942, World War II, and we meet our first of 3 narrators, Hannah Martell. She barely escapes Nazi Germany after her fiancé is killed. She then tries to flee to America on a ship that is eventually turned away at the port. Where will she go next? Hannah flees to Brussels, where she lives with her cousin Lily, our second narrator. Eventually, fearing for her own life, Hannah returns to the underground work that she had been taking on. She joins the Sapphire Line, a secret resistance effort that is led by our book's third narrator, Micheline. However, soon, Hannah is faced with a test of her loyalties after a huge mistake puts Lily's family in danger as they face deportation and are placed on a train to Auschwitz. Sarah Penner, author of The Lost Apothecary, said, Codename Sapphire is a heart-wrenching exploration of the decisions that women must make when their loyalties are put to the test in the most unimaginable of circumstances.
The Sun Walks Down by Fiona McFarlane is historical fiction set in 1883 in southern Australia, and it's about a young boy who goes missing in the desert. think you can tell from the cover how dangerous a situation that might be. Everyone is out searching. The wealthy landowner, the police, servants, farmers, newlyweds, indigenous trackers are brought in to help. This is historical fiction because it is set in 1883, and it's certainly a thriller as the suspense of the missing boy keeps us turning the pages without ever losing hope for the boy. But mostly it's a character study of all the people in the town and their relationships to each other. Some of those relationships not so good. Note, if you read this or listen to the audio book, you're going to want to jot down some of the characters' names because there's a lot of them and they're all important.
Homecoming by Kate Morton. Finally, another book by this best-selling author. This follows her usual dual storyline structure, and I think it's one of her best. In 1959, there was a murder in Adelaide Hills, Australia, which was not solved at that time. 60 years later, in 2018, Jess, a journalist, hurries from London back to Australia to visit her grandmother Nora in the hospital. She finds a true crime book about those events in 1959 and the never-solved murder. This is a solid mystery with interesting conclusions and the tale telling that families are complicated and every one of them has secrets. You'll have to wait until April when the book is published to get this from your library. The Trackers by Charles Frazier. He's the author of the very popular book Cold Mountain, set during the Civil War, and Verena, about Jefferson Davis's second wife. This one is set during the Great Depression. Artist Val Welch has been hired by the Works Progress Administration to paint a mural in a post office in Dawes, Wyoming. While there, he stays at a large ranch owned by John Long and his wife, Eve. Eve formerly led an itinerant life performing with a Western swing band. As Val is learning more about the history of Dawes to include in his mural, Eve flees the ranch. John asks Val to track her down, and he travels from San Francisco to Florida trying to find her. Read this to experience the lives of everyday people during this difficult time in our history, and for the beautiful language. I wrote down lots of quotes while I was reading this book. The Trackers will be published in April. Now on to Big Buzz. These books have already been making the most anticipated book lists.
Someone Else's Shoes comes out February 7th from Jojo Moyes, who you may know from Me Before You or The Giver of Stars. I recently watched an interview with the author. She said that post-COVID, she wanted to write a lighter story, something to make people feel uplifted. The result is this contemporary reverse telling of Cinderella. Of course, you've heard the saying, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And that happens when gym bags are accidentally swapped post-workout. Sam discovers Nisha's bag has 6-inch crocodile leather designer Christian Louboutin heels. Nisha Cantor is a wealthy socialite living her best life. That is until her husband blindsides her, cuts her off from all funds, and tells her he wants a divorce. Sam Kemp is in survival mode. She is working to save her family, her job. And suddenly, these new designer shoes and heels are providing her with the amazing confidence she needs. Nisha's husband tells her she must return those custom shoes or she'll lose any form of a divorce settlement. Can Nisha find them in time? Discover the power of female friendship when these two women walk literally and figuratively in someone else's shoes. Penguin Random House says this book is full of Jojo Moyes, signature humor, brilliant storytelling, and warmth. Someone Else's Shoes is a story about how just one little thing can suddenly change everything.
Rebecca Mackay's I Have Some Questions for You has made it to lots of anticipated books of 2023 lists. She's a popular writer who grapples with contemporary issues. This one might be called a boarding school thriller. Bodie Kane spent 4 years at a boarding school in Granby, New Hampshire. Her roommate was murdered during their senior year. Omar Evans, the school's athletic trainer, was convicted. But is the case really closed? Now a film professor and podcaster, Bodie returns to Granby School to teach a class. She begins to remember events back then and wonders if the real murderer is still out there. This is a page turner and look at how we reckon with things from our past that we really don't want to remember. The writing style is very engaging, and there are lots of current topics to think and talk about. Oh my goodness, did the Greek gods live exciting, violent, and bloody lives? Costanza Casati's debut novel is for fans of Greek mythology retellings like Madeline Miller's Circe. Clytemnestra was the sister of Helen of Troy and the wife of Agamemnon, who killed Clytemnestra's first husband and child in order to marry her. He is mostly offstage while fighting the Trojan War. While he's away, Clytemnestra takes a lover who treats her much better. And therefore things don't go very well for Agamemnon when he returns. Perhaps the message is, what does a wife owe her husband when he has not treated her very well? This was fast-moving, exciting, and bloody, and I was right there with Clytemnestra. Go as a River makes our Big Buzz category, especially for Colorado readers. The author, Shelley Reed, lives on the Western Slope and was a lecturer at Western College University until she quit to write this book, which she had been thinking about for over a decade. This is the life story of Victoria Nash. It starts with Tori as a teenager in the 1940s. Her mother has died, and she runs the household for her father, brother, and uncle on a peach farm in the town of Iola. One day she meets Wilson Moon, a Native American drifter, and their brief relationship will impact her life for years. Iola was an actual Colorado town flooded by the damming of the Gunnison River in the 1960s. In the 1960s in the book, Victoria is now alone, caring for her special peach trees. Will she sell out in advance of the flooding to come? What about all her memories there? This book is as gorgeous as the beautiful cover. I hope everybody in Colorado and beyond will read it.
Hello, Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. She's the author of a big hit a few years ago, Dear Edward, and she's back with a new book. This book might as well be called Hello Book Clubs because it's going to be a perfect choice. William is a young man from a sad and dysfunctional family, and he escapes that by spending all of his time on the basketball court, from schools to playgrounds to church groups, and eventually earns a college scholarship to play basketball. In college, he meets Julia Padovano and then gets involved in her entire family. She's one of 4 close-knit sisters. They often compare themselves to the Little Women sisters. And you too will be pulled in, just like William, and think you're part of the Padovano family. But what happens when William's past comes back to start haunting him more, and when cracks start developing between the relationships within the Padovano sisters? You're going to want to find out. Now we're moving on to mysteries and thrillers. This time, all of our mysteries are from other countries. None from the United States, but we have some great choices for you. Blaze Me a Sun is a mystery set in Sweden. In 1986, Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme was assassinated in Stockholm. This is true. This is a novel set against that time period. In a small town in the southern part of Sweden, a young woman is found murdered, and the murderer has left a note indicating he may strike again. So now this very small town police force not only has a murderer on their hands, possibly a serial killer, and they cannot get any help. Tip lines are overwhelmed with information about this prime minister. The Swedish police can't send anyone out from Stockholm. They're searching the rest of the country. And the policeman involved in this spends the rest of his career trying to solve the crime, even as more victims are found. And he retires despondent over that lack of ability to solve the case. His son becomes a policeman, and now he's burdened with solving the same case years later. This was so immersive. I felt like I could have given you directions around this town and introduced you to all the people. The setting was that spectacular. I loved the thriller and the small town setting.
Our next stop in mystery and thrillers is India with Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor, released on January 3rd, and was Good Morning America's book club pick. This is a thriller, crime fiction, family saga all wrapped in one. It's been compared to The Great Gatsby and The Godfather. It's a beast of a book at 556 pages. It's 3 a.m. in New Delhi, and a Mercedes is speeding, hops a curb, strikes people, and 5 are killed. We're in contemporary India, and we meet the wealthy Wadia family, who are used to getting anything and everything they want. There are 3 characters who are key to how this story unfolds. First is Sonny. He is the son of a gangster. He is trying to make a name for himself in the Wadia family. AJ is a servant to this family, and he was actually the one driving that Mercedes, and yet has no clue how he got behind the wheel. We will learn that he plays a crucial role in this saga. Netta is the journalist who is enamored by Sonny's money. Lee Child says Age of Vice is sensationally good, huge, epic, immersive, and absorbing, certain to be a book of the year. 2 more books are planned in this saga, and it's interesting to note that FX Network picked up this story as a series 3 years before the book was even released.
Better the Blood by Michael Bennett is a mystery set in New Zealand. Bennett is a well-known writer, playwright, screenwriter in New Zealand, and he is mixed race, white and Maori, as is his main character, Hannah Westerman. She is a detective who was sent in to break up a protest at a Maori site that they considered sacred. And since then, she's been somewhat of an outcast with her own people. But now murders are taking place on Maori land and targeting Maori people. And she is struggling to regain trust with that community in order to solve the case. She needs information from them. She needs to be able to talk to them. I loved this intense mystery, but also I loved it because it was like a vicarious visit to New Zealand.
Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone comes to us from the Australian mystery author Benjamin Stevenson. This title was released on January 14th and is the first in a new series titled Ernest Cunningham series. You see, Ernest is the narrator. The author asked himself, what if I spoiled the entire book on the first page? Can I still build a crime novel out of it? I'd say the answer is definitely yes. The scene is a family reunion at a ski resort. The family is gathering, and it's extra special as Brother Michael is just being released from prison. But it's our narrator, Ernie, who sent him, and he's hopeful that they can move on. But what happens when yet another dead body is found, this time at the resort where they're staying? This book is being called Knives Out meets Thursday Murder Club. The series is being adapted into an HBO series. The second book, due later in 2023, is titled Everyone on This Train is a Suspect. If you opt to read this title, I highly recommend having a 3x5 card handy in which you can note family members, as the tree gets quite extensive.
The Red Queen by Juan Gomez Jurado, mystery set in Spain. This was a huge bestseller in Spain and many other countries, and is finally being published in the US. It's also being made into a movie on the Amazon Spanish channel. If you like the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series because of the remarkable mind of Lisbeth, then you're going to love Antonia, a brilliant forensic investigator who stopped working because of past traumas. There's also Juan Gutierrez, a disgraced, suspended cop who might even be facing criminal charges, but he's given one last chance. Get Antonia to work again and solve a seemingly unsolvable murder. Antonia and Juan make a great, if rather prickly, team, and I'm looking forward to more books in this series.
And our final title today is The Soulmate from Australian author Sally Hepworth, due out on April 4th. You may know Sally Hepworth from The Good Sister and The Younger Wife. In The Soulmate, we meet married couple Gabe and Pippa. You see, they appear to have it all. Life is grand, and they have an amazing home that sits on a cliffside. They didn't realize, though, when purchasing this home, that that cliffside is often sought as a place for people to jump. And Gabe has actually become somewhat of a local hero, as he has seen and talked 7 people off of that cliff. But the 8th person, she got away. She slipped. Or did she? This psychological thriller is classic Hepworth. The twists and turns abound just when you think you have things figured out. Well, think again. The Soulmate from Sally Hepworth. And that concludes our titles and presentations. We thank you so much for joining us and listening and hearing more about what's coming out. Hope you enjoy these titles.
We hope you enjoy these books as much as we did. Thanks for listening.